Hello, good morning. I'm Matt Addison. I've got David Lynch alongside me for this morning. Welcome to today's morning bulletin. The season is not quite over yet, but Liverpool have already made their first summer signing ahead of the next season in, of course, Fabio Carvalho, who was announced yesterday coming in from Fulham. It's no surprise, of course. We knew for a while that it was going to happen, but we're going to have a chat about it this morning anyway. I suppose the first question, David, is are we expecting him to be part of the squad next season rather than go out on loan? That seems to be the general kind of feeling with him coming in.
Yeah, that's the talk from the club. No real plans to loan him out. They think he can play a part now, and you imagine there's probably going to be some spots opening up, isn't there, for him to play some minutes. I think a few of the players who've made some big contributions this season, but will be moving on in the summer. Should open up a couple of spots for him, and you look at the impact he's had at championship level at such a young age. It's feasible that he can make that step up. Okay, maybe he's not going to be coming straight in and being at Mo Salah's level and scoring 40 goals in a season or anything like that. But Jurgen Klopp's a manager who's proven that he can trust young players, and I think Carvalho has done enough in the Championship to suggest he can make that step up straight into the Liverpool first team and be in and around the squad. I think it's in fact a similar challenge to what Harvey Elliott had, having his loan spell at Blackburn, performing so impressively in the Championship at a very young age, and then stepping up and contributing to the Liverpool squad. So I think, Fabio Carvalho is seen in a similar light, really.
Yeah, I suppose there's a few different questions to kind of think about with him, isn't there? I suppose one of them is around the kind of position that he's going to play. There's probably a couple of roles that he can play, maybe more than that. I suppose speaking to people at Fulham, the idea seems to be that you want him central rather than wide, but I suppose he can play wide. He could play possibly as a false nine. Obviously, has played as a 10 for Fulham, but Liverpool don't particularly very often play with a 10. I mean, I suppose the beauty of it is he's so young, you can kind of make him into whatever you want him to be, can't you, over the next few seasons?
Yeah, it's similar to Elliott in that sense, I suppose, in that, a player who can sort of play off the sides in the front three, but also you'd like to be able to sort of train them and mould them into being able to play that one of those two sort of forward-thinking midfield roles that Klopp has sorted out. So I think, I think he'd be ideal in either of those. I think it was interesting that there was, some reports yesterday that I think initially Liverpool maybe see him as a forward, maybe, coming in off that left-hand side is maybe where they see him initially making the biggest impact, but I think definitely the midfield thing is something they'll look at going forward, because I think he's obviously got real potential to play there, and people at Fulham will know him best, and if they think he's best in the middle, then you really do think that one of those midfield roles would be ideal for him. Very similar to Harvey Elliott. I suppose you could imagine those two as a midfield two ahead of a Fabinho or whoever's in the holding midfield position. That's quite an exciting thought, I suppose.
Yeah, we've not really seen too many sort of out-and-out number 10s be signed by Liverpool. I suppose Roberto Firmino, probably one of them. He's obviously moved into that false nine position. I think that's something that I'd be interested to see whether Liverpool try it at some point. It does seem like with the kind of pressing, the ability he's got, it's a role he possibly could do. And whether that's something that Liverpool look at, I don't know. But it does feel like he could maybe play in a central position in the front three as well.
Yeah, but to be honest, I hadn't even considered that, and I think it's a really good point, because I think that's one position where Liverpool, as they try and move this front three forward, and they try and evolve and bring in younger players to replace the players who were the old front three, I suppose. That is possibly the most difficult position of all to fill. I think there's not very many players with that profile directly out there who you could think would come in and do Firmino's job. I suppose they had to mould him themselves. He wasn't really playing like in that way when he came into Liverpool. He was, he played quite a lot in attacking midfield, never really seen as an out-and-out striker. And then Liverpool made him into a bit of both, really. And I think, maybe they've seen something in Fabio Carvalho that suggests he could be that. And I think, as I say, it's a really difficult position to pick for. So, if he's got those, we know he's got the finishing skills of a centre forward. We've seen that quite a few times in his time at Fulham, but also, that ability to create and drop deep and hold the ball. If he's got that as well, then that would be absolutely perfect for Liverpool.
I suppose one of the other important considerations as well is the kind of homegrown quota. There's a couple of homegrown players that possibly could move on, if not this summer, then probably the summer afterwards. And I suppose that's something that Liverpool have got to think about as well, isn't it? We know there's certain numbers within the squad that they've got to hit with these players. And if you can get someone in who's young and is effectively going to fill one of those for the next few seasons at the very least, I suppose it's not the reason why they've signed him, of course. He's obviously a very good player as well, but it's got to be a consideration as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's the sort of thing that Liverpool do keep an eye on. We know the planning there is impeccable, and they do keep an eye on how these things are developing and what they think the squad might look like in a couple of years' time, and whether they'll be fulfilling the homegrown quota at that point. It's massively important, particularly in Europe as well, whereby the amount of homegrown players you name decides how big the squad is that you can name overall. So things like that are important, and Liverpool will definitely have seen that as a real another part of the appeal of signing him is to fill out that homegrown quota. Definitely.
Let's have a bit of a think as well about the kind of squad in general. Obviously, Liverpool quite well stocked at the moment. They've got lots of options in lots of the positions, and obviously a couple of the positions that Fabio Carvalho plays in as well. I mean, we've said about Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain before on the morning bulletin around kind of what his future might look like. Obviously, Divock Origi has said his goodbyes. Now he's not going to play at the weekend. We know that he is moving probably to AC Milan. I mean, is Fabio Carvalho almost the replacement for both of those players? I mean, he can play a couple of different positions. He's quite versatile. He can do a couple of bits. I mean, if you're looking to kind of trim the squad down a little bit, maybe it does make sense to have someone who can do more than one of those roles and possibly could possibly replace a couple of these squad players.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's potential for real churn in the squad this summer. Those two, as you mentioned, obviously Origi definitely leaving. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, I expect will generate interest. I don't think Liverpool are trying to kick him out the door by any means. And he's been consistently fit of late, but he hasn't been near the squad. It's been a real struggle for him to pick up minutes, and more from his perspective, I expect he'll maybe push and try and look what's out there, and if he can get a move, would go for it, because I think he wants to play more football. But there's also Takuma Minamino, who's another one who played a very, very important role for Liverpool this season. But if he's generating interest from elsewhere and he feels that he can play, he can end up playing 30, 40 games a season somewhere else, and I think he might want, that might appeal, particularly as he's won some winners medals at Liverpool now. It might really appeal to him. So I think there is potential for churn there, and I think Fabio Carvalho, the fact that he can play across a number of roles is important. But it maybe highlights that Liverpool won't just be done there in terms of if they're looking at forwards. If there are more people to do move on, then maybe it'll be Fabio Carvalho and maybe another, because I think those players, although we don't think of them as being involved regularly, is they've actually played quite a big role this season. Particularly Minamino, who was top scorer in the FA Cup and the League Cup. Origi always scoring against Everton. These are things that you're gonna have to cover. You're gonna have to pick up some of these minutes. Maybe going down the route of getting younger players who are less demanding in terms of playing time and know that you've got to be patient. Maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, certainly a lot to kind of think about, isn't there? In terms of, I suppose it depends pretty much on who leaves compared to how many more numbers you'd need to bring in. But I mean, I think for me as well, this is another kind of example of something we've spoken about in the past as well, in terms of kind of Liverpool evolving a little bit as well. We've seen them kind of move from slightly more functional players, if you want to call them that, maybe a kind of a Wijnaldum and Emre Can, the more kind of physical midfielders, to sort of more of a technical sort of midfield role, or certain other positions as well. You think of Thiago and Harvey Elliott moving Curtis Jones back. It kind of feels a bit like it's not quite copying Manchester City, but it's a bit more moving towards that kind of thing. It kind of feels a little bit of a shift really to a more technically gifted player, which I think is an interesting element in terms of the way that Jurgen Klopp's style has evolved as his time at Liverpool has progressed.
Yeah, 100%. I do think there's an element of sort of, like you say, not copying City, but trying to take some elements of their game, retaining Liverpool's identity certainly, but trying to take, add elements of what Manchester City do really well and what maybe Liverpool have previously lacked. And it's interesting to see that evolution, because, as you say, in his first few years at Liverpool, it was all about, let's just shut down the midfield completely. Our fullbacks will be the main creators. All the goals will come from the front three. But we're starting to slightly move away from that now. You saw at the start of the season, Harvey Elliott playing in a central position, a really hugely creative player. Thiago has completely changed things in there. He's very different to the old profile of midfield that Liverpool were reliant on in that area. So it's the next stage of the evolution really, and I think that's the way it's going to go, because I think you look at Thiago being possibly out of the Champions League final. Fingers crossed he can recover and can play a part in that. But if he is out, Liverpool don't really have a like-for-like replacement, do they? Or anyone who you'd say could really hold up that creative end of the bargain in a similar way. And I think Liverpool will know that they need more depth on that front. They need to that if that's what they want the profile of the midfield to eventually be, then they're going to need more players who are like that, more passers, more creators. And I think, Fabio Carvalho is sort of part of that evolution, and hopefully he can be a big part of that in the years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels like a big deal for Liverpool to get done, but plenty, of course, to play for this season still, with the Champions League final to come at the weekend. Quite likely that Fabio Carvalho is just the start of the business for Julian Ward this summer. We'll cover it all, of course, as soon as we have those updates. Make sure you check out the podcast as well that we recorded yesterday with Jamie Carragher. Loads more good stuff in the build-up to Paris coming your way for the rest of this week too. For now, though, thank you for watching along at home. That will just about do us, though. We'll see you very soon.